Thank you. Thank you so much. Yes. Hello, everyone. We're really happy to welcome you for the International Virtual Workshop on Interoperability and Lunar Activities Database. And today, we have with you 3 hours and a half to work together, to discuss, and to get the answers to the most pressing questions. This event is conducted in coordination with GEGSLA, Global Expert Group on Sustainable Lunar Activities, LSIC, and Lunar Surface Innovation Consortium. And first, I would like to give you a little bit information about what are the main goals for today, what are the agenda, and what to expect. Our main goals for this virtual workshop is to first establish international community to work on interoperability, to identify what database we need for future lunar activities, and establish and decide on a coordination system and a leading body. The agenda of the workshop will be as follows. We will start with introduction. We will briefly introduce to you GEGSLA, MVA, Logic, and LSIC. We will then move to the expert panel with Q&A session. After that, we will transition to Zoom breakout rooms to work together in mirror boards. There you will have an opportunity for a short pause, to grab a coffee. In the mirror boards, we will work together to answer 10 questions concerning lunar activities database. After that, every breakout room will have a moderator, and we will present the outcomes. Moderators will be, all of us will be moving to the main room and presenting the outcomes. We will have a Q&A open floor session where everyone will have a possibility, to express their opinion, to say what they're thinking about it. And we will try to discuss what are the next steps for us as a community. And that's it. During the workshop itself, please write your questions in the chat. So for example, when you have the opportunity to ask your questions after the expert panel, I have, the opportunity to see them. What you can expect, as we already said, we're gonna have an expert panel discussion. There will be breakout rooms to work in groups. And we really, really hope to see, to come up with concrete future steps and actions in the end of this workshop. And right now, I would like to invite representatives of MVA, GEGSLA, and Logic and LSIC. And we will first start with Giuseppe Rebaldi. Giuseppe, are you here? I'll stop sharing for now. Oh, Giuseppe, you are muted.
Sorry. Yes, okay, sorry. So again, good morning, good afternoon to everyone. And it's a pleasure to address you and to explain what is the Moon Village Association briefly and what is the relation with GEGSLA and the workshop also related today. As you heard, this is a joint workshop, and I thank, of course, all the other organizations, Logic and LSIC, that they are having this workshop together with us. So the Moon Village Association is an NGO which has been established in 2017. The main goal is to act as a platform to bring together basically space agency, government, industry, academia, as well international organization and the public on different multi-subject topics as we see today in lunar governance, and foster cooperation between different countries and organizations. Within all the activity of the MVA, which you can check, of course, on the website, I like to zoom briefly on the Global Expert Group on Sustainable Lunar Activity, GEGSLA, short, which basically was initiated in 2022 with more than 40, let's say, country representative with a number of experts. And this group has published in 2023, I think, and considered an important document, which maybe not many of you might know, which is called Recommended Framework and Key Elements for Feasible and Sustainable Lunar Activity, which basically defined by all these experts how the lunar activity should be conducted. Glavki will send you in the chat the link. So out of this document, we can say that has been the incubator which has then brought to the creation of ATLAC. As a matter of fact, the Romanian delegation did propose the creation of ATLAC, being inspired by the activity which we carried out. As far as the GEGSLA is concerned, right now we are in the operational phase and we have 3 working groups. One is working group 1 related to lunar environmental protection. The second is lunar technical coordination, and this, let's say, workshop is a spin-off, if you like. It's part of this activity, which has a chair team as well as Marcel. And the third working group is lunar multi-stakeholder coordination. So I'd like then to conclude by, again, thanking all the other organizations, of course, thanking Ekaterina and all other people from MVA and the other organization. I just want to say that this is an impressive result. We have about 150 registration from 32 countries. So this is a clear example of the interest on the topic and, of course, the organization. We're really looking forward to a good result out of this workshop with concrete, let's say, specific action. Thank you, and I wish you an excellent workshop.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Giuseppe, for this amazing speech. Right now, we would like to move to Christian Jaburek, representing Logic today. Christine, the floor is yours.
Thank you. So my name is Kristen Jaburek, and I am the director of the Logic Consortium. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about what Logic is and what we've been working on for the last year and what we're going to start working on in the upcoming year. So Logic stands for the Lunar Operating Guidelines for Infrastructure Consortium, and we bring together an international and commercial lunar community in order to work on adopting, adapting, and potentially authoring interoperability standards to ensure that the lunar infrastructure systems that will exist on the moon can function in a cohesive system. So we began in 2024, and we're funded by DARPA and managed by the Johns Hopkins Applied Physics Laboratory, or APL. We currently have more than 1,000 members, which I'm super excited about, and they span across commercial, international, academia, nonprofit, and government organizations. So we have a good mix. So, we want to make sure that lunar infrastructure is interoperable from the start. And to work towards this goal, we established monthly community working groups and a set of use cases to use to structure our work. And each month we have working groups where we to walk through the use cases and work to identify standards to address the interoperability gaps that we see in areas like power, comms, PNT, and ISRU. And you can see our working products on our website. So I'll drop the website into the chat if you want to take a look at what we're working on. In this first year, we heard, beyond just talking about use cases and standards recommendations, we want to start validating if these standards are going to work. And so we just made an announcement this week that we are going to be moving in the next year. In addition to our standards recommendation work, continuing that work, we will start doing some community-led experimentation. So that was a big announcement this week. There is more to come, but I hope that you will join Logic. I will drop the link for registration in the chat. It does require registration, but it is complimentary. And we look forward to hearing all of your ideas in this workshop. And I'm very happy to be here. So thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Christine. This is amazing presentation of Logic. And right now, let's move to Wes Furman from LSIC.
Yeah. Hello, everybody. I know it can be pretty hard to understand the various ways you can work with the different consortia and things that are out there. So I'll take just a moment to say what LSIC is about and how we relate to Logic and the work that's really going on between Logic and GEGSLA on interoperability. So fundamentally, LSIC is a community that's focused on technology development. And we support NASA Space Technology Mission Directorate, Space Tech. So really focused on that technology development part of it for The lunar surface, of course, it's a very broad set of folks who are interested in this, including internationals, commercial, lots of commercial, academia, and of course, governments and nonprofits. And I see some familiar faces in the audience. You're all welcome to join LSIC as well. I'll put the link in the chat in just a little. And many of the LSIC members, LSIC has been around for about 5 years now, have called out the need for standards and considering interoperability from the start, just as Kristen was saying. And that's why Logic was stood up to focus specifically on that part of the problem. And of course, there is interplay between standards and technology development, like LSIC is particularly interested in. So, for instance, you can't standardize on a technology before it's been developed, but also definition of those standards can help enhance innovation that can actually be infused. So you can think about how a USB standard interface allowed for development of all sorts of peripherals that could be incorporated, infused quite readily. And so Logic is focused on the standards and motivating their development as appropriate, identifying those critical interfaces that allow innovation to occur on either side. And LSIC coordinates with Logic to bring these insights back to our technology development community. And so that's why I'm excited to be here today, to see what insights there are from the folks that are here so we can bring them back to our technology development community of LSIC. So I'm excited to listen and hear back so we can unleash those technology developers to do their thing all, in an interoperable ecosystem. So thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Wes. Yeah, I think today, we got this really interesting mixture of participants representing not only academia and nonprofit sector, but also industry and government. So this is amazing opportunity for us today to discuss interoperability and what exactly we would like to see in this kind of, lunar activities database. Right now, we are moving to the expert panel. So while I'm introducing the experts, I will put a presentation with the slide with the beautiful photos. But after that, we will be speaking the same way we speak right now. So let me 1 minute. Okay, perfect. Let's go. Okay, let's start. Today, we have with us 4 speakers. One speaker will be participating with the help of video message. So let me introduce to you our experts. First one is Ms. Arti Olmaini. She is the director of the United Nations Office for Outer Space Affairs. She works to promote international cooperation in the peaceful use of and exploration of space and in the utilization of space science and technology for sustainable economic and social development. Today, Ms. Holomaini will be, presented by a video message. We also have with us Mihak Sarang. Mihak Sarang serves as the Director of Industry Integration for Open Lunar. Open Lunar is a global nonprofit dedicated to the peaceful and sustainable exploration of the moon. The flagship project, the Lunar Ledger, is a global lunar database of objects and activities. It emerged from 3 years of research and consultation with stakeholders across government, academia, and industry. The ledger will launch in the fall this year, and they are currently seeking beta testers, early users, commercial partners interested in submitting mission information. It is designed to operationalize the principles of information sharing outlined in the Outer Space Treaty and to support coordination across diverse lunar efforts. Open Lunar have also conducted research on the interoperability standards, and this is available on their website. The next speaker is Frederick Slane. Frederick Slane is Executive Director of the Space Infrastructure Foundation. Fred has over 45 years in the space industry. His work includes human spaceflight, spacecraft design, operations, test, and evaluation. He has military, civil, and commercial space industry experience. His work on technical space standards began in 1999. Today, he is the International Chair of the International Organization for Standardization for Space Systems and Operations. We also have with us today Ulpia Elena Bottizato. She is the chair of the UN Corpus Scientific and Technical Subcommittee and co-chair of the Action Team on Lunar Activities Consultation. ATLAC, a multilateral initiative at the UN Corpus aimed at fostering expert-level dialogue on responsible governance and cooperation in future lunar activities. The industry is represented today by Marshall Hawley. Marshall Hawley is the U.S. Government Affairs Lead for the iSpace Technologies U.S., where he supports stakeholder engagement and business development efforts. Prior to iSpace, Marshall served as manager of Washington, D.C. operations for the Space Foundation, managing key relationships with Congress, international partners, and federal agencies. He previously supported microgravity and Earth observation policy and the Space Studies Board of the National Academies of Science, Engineering, and Medicine. And the last person in this list, this is me. I'm your moderator for the whole workshop today. My name is Ekaterina Sevchikova, so I'm the founder of Parsec Scale. This is a space tech and innovation consulting firm focused on emerging space and deep tech ventures. And we work on the multitude of topics, including lunar dust mitigation. The main idea of this organization is to advance progress on Earth and space by bringing new ideas and concepts to the market. So we work with startups, small and mid-sized companies, incubators, accelerators, and nonprofits to bring their technologies to life. I'm also part of GEGSLA, specifically Working Group 2, where we work on lunar technical coordination. And yeah, so this is it. I will stop sharing. And with this amazing set of speakers, I would like to first for us to move to this video message from Ms. Arti Holomaini. Let me share it first. Up. Hope everyone can see the screen.
Dear colleagues and participants, it's my great pleasure to address you at this exciting workshop focusing on interoperability of lunar infrastructure, technical standards, and the development of a lunar activities database. As many different actors, both public and private, intensify their plans to establish long-term and large-scale operations on the Moon, the need to ensure the compatibility and interoperability between systems and infrastructure is absolutely paramount. As we have learned from the past decades of space activities, collaboration between diverse actors comes with baggage. Not only different cultures, but also, and perhaps most decisively in this case, different systems and different equipment. This can be a disincentive to international cooperation, and it can create obstacles to the efficient and effective use of space infrastructure. But right now, as we are still in the early stages of our lunar ventures, we do have a unique opportunity to identify the interoperability standards that we want to see in the development of lunar infrastructure, especially for key components such as human life support or positioning, navigation, and timing systems. But for interoperability to be successful, it must be developed through an inclusive and collaborative approach. It cannot mean imposing one standards over the others. It must be the result of a collective effort with the participation of all relevant actors. The efforts of GEGSLA, LSIC, and LOGIC in fostering these inclusive conversations are commendable and timely as we navigate the complexities of these topics. If you continue on this path, your work can play a pivotal role in shaping the technologies and strategies that will underpin future lunar missions. At UNUSA, we are responsible for taking these efforts to the next level by assisting the member states of COPUS in their cooperation and collaboration efforts. In fulfilling this responsibility, we are committed to ensuring that stakeholders such as yourselves can provide expert inputs for consideration in multilateral discussions. To respond to the increasing need for concrete action ensuring peaceful, safe, and sustainable lunar activities, UNUSA has established a new lunar program that we called One Moon for All. Through this program, we foster high-level dialogue, including with industry experts, and ensure their views and insights come to the attention of member states. Many of you, for example, will remember the first UN conference on sustainable lunar activities that we organized just last year, just before the beginning of the annual session of COPUOS. The open and inclusive discussions fostered during the conference played a crucial role in validating the establishment of ATLAC, the Action Team on Lunar Activities Consultation, demonstrating that with the right guidance and information, member states are fully capable of listening, understanding, and delivering meaningful action. Reflecting the multi-stakeholder nature of lunar activities, the One Moon for All program is open to the contributions of all actors, including and especially from the private sector. If you want your voice, the voice of industry and experts, to be heard at the UN, we are ready to work with you to make it happen. To highlight what I mean, let me tell you about ongoing efforts happening at COPUOS that are of direct relevance to your discussions today. It is vital that you recognize and align with these efforts to avoid duplication and to ensure that your work is not done in vain. For example, a few weeks ago, we wrapped up the 64th session of the Legal Subcommittee of COPUOS. One of the highlights was the substantial progress made by the Working Group on the status and application of the 5 UN treaties. The working group advanced in developing dedicated tools and practices to enhance the implementation of information sharing under Article 11 of the Outer Space Treaty, specifically through a template and online database maintained by UNUSA. This progress directly builds upon the foundations laid down by well-designed civil society initiatives like the Article 11 project, which for many years raised awareness on the importance of enhanced information sharing and the opportunities presented for this by Article 11. This is the type of cross-collaboration between private actors and the UN that can drive meaningful, tangible, valuable results. Similarly, ATLAC, the Lunar Action Team, is now almost ready to begin its substantive work. Building on the foundations that were laid down by expert and civil society organizations in recent years, from GEGSLA, LSIC and LOGIC to LPP, Moon Dialogues and others, the Action Team will have focused expert-level exchanges aimed at improving coordination of lunar activities, including the consideration of a dedicated international mechanism. As you prepare to engage in your sessions and discussions, I strongly encourage you to adopt a synergetic and complementary approach. If we each play our part, together we can build on each other's work, ensuring our efforts are complementary and reinforcing, leading to a shared vision of what we call One Moon for All. Your dedication to advancing sustainable lunar activities is inspiring and essential. By preparing the groundwork for interoperability in synergy with the existing UN efforts, you have a unique opportunity to pave the way for collaborative and peaceful presence on the Moon. Thank you for your commitment and your contribution to this vital endeavor. I'm glad that I could be with you.
Okay, we are very grateful for this amazing message. And right now, I will try to pin all the experts and also pin that is here and Ulpia, could you please rename yourself?
I did, sorry.
No worries. So I think right now we can start first following this amazing, thoughtful message of Ms. Holamaini. I think the first question with which we can start our discussion, what do you think, what would interoperability done right will look like, for example, in 2030, in 5 years? What kind of actions we need to, to employ to make sure that we actually are including interoperability into our work? So this is a question for everyone on the panel. So who would like to go first?
I can start.
Yeah.
Thank you,
let's start.
Katarina.
So yeah, it's great to be here to represent Open Lunar Foundation. My name is Mahek Sarang. So I think we think a lot about interoperability. We think a lot about coordination at the Open Lunar Foundation. And for us, interoperability done right means that all lunar actors, whether public or private, can access, contribute to, and adopt interoperability standards and practices, and that those practices are designed in a way that helps reduce risk, avoid duplication, or investment in duplicative efforts, and enable responsible coordination without having a centralized control authority or body. So doing it in a way that is open, collaborative, and transparent. And I think the question we have to ask ourselves is, from now until 2030, what is the vision that we can set now that allows us to actually give practices to these actors to implement those principles and lead to a truly interoperable, practice and community. So yeah, that's answers that
Amazing.
question.
Thank you so much for, for Open Lunar point of view. Who would like to go the next? Maybe Fred. Yeah, go ahead.
I'll go. I think one of the things that the group needs to understand is, while the objective is spot on, international standards for the community, you need to understand what that means. When you develop a technical standard, it takes on the order of 3 to 8 years from the time you start with a concept until the actual publication date. I'm talking about standards in ISO, for example. ISO, by the way, was chartered by the UN to develop international standards in 1947. So the UN did actually reach out to the world and say, we do need these standards. Inside ISO, there are 164 technical committees, one of which deals with space. And of the 20 subcommittees under that technical committee, there are 2 that are connected to space. We bridge over to many technical areas in other technical committees. So there's a huge body of active experts, and getting involved for a specific objective is exactly what is needed for this kind of activity. But this group, all the participants, have to understand what it is you want to do. ISO is a very wide platform. The member bodies from nations are the national standards bodies from each country. So in the United States, that would be the American National Standards Institute, which has a special relationship with the US government through NIST and an MOU there. So many countries have that kind of a relationship between industry and government. So understanding each member country, if we have 32 nations on this call, you need to be in touch with your national standards bodies saying, we need to go ahead and do this kind of activity. So I guess where I'm going with this is that there's a lot of process, and it's a very good process. It's strong. It makes sure that those with a direct and material interest have a voice, and they cannot be shut out. That the community is there to help industry grow. And so in that context, the objectives that are stated are extremely important. And then how you break that down and say, okay, well, what is interoperability in a lunar environment? Have that discussion. Come up with a stated objective that, 2 or 3 sentences, and be able to break the problems down into manageable pieces. So interoperability, this is not the only group for space that thinks interoperability is very important. You'll be welcome. But understanding the environment that you're working in, that you want to engage with, is extremely important at this stage.
Yeah, that's totally right. And you mentioned a lot of important details, Fred, starting from how long this process can be, and that we already have the actual body of experts, a lot of experts that are ready to contribute and to help the industry to move forward, right? And you also mentioned one important detail. You mentioned that, the UN was asking for the standards, so there were specific incentives. So that's really nice, but we will also touch upon these topics a little bit later. So Marshall, would you like to say what do you, in your opinion, interoperability done right look like?
Yeah, thanks, Katarina. So my name is Marshall Hawley. I've been in the space policy community here in Washington, D.C. for it's going on, 15 years now. I've been with iSpace for 4.5 years. But I have to say, in this capacity, I'm speaking as a member of the my role as GEGSLA, and having seen a lot of things in the commercial space industry, not directly on behalf of the company. I think you all saw we had our recently our second mission. We're having a conference on, I think, June 23rd to discuss our results from that. So I hope everyone tunes in. But I think from a commercial perspective, I want to talk about these tensions, I think, between putting these interoperability standards in place and then designing really for mission success. So I think the lunar, the current state of lunar exploration is still a bit amorphous. I don't think the platforms have been exactly nailed down right now. And a lot of these payloads have very bespoke payload requirements, and it takes a lot of time and money to integrate these bespoke payloads. So we really, from the commercial side, it would behoove us a lot to start baking in some interoperability requirements early on. I think the challenge is, that takes, when you start focusing on these more generalized interoperability requirements, that's a resource. There's an opportunity cost from that when you're talking about specifically integrating customer payload requirements. And so I think, I'm not sure I have a great solution to this, but I think it would help the community a lot if there was some sort of incentive. I'm not sure through NASA, but some sort of a monetary incentive that would help companies really, invest resources in this, and really incentivize all of us to talk to each other in much more expansive ways. Even just the idea of sending somebody to a workshop, that takes time and money that needs to be justified. And I think would help all of us in the lunar community, work together if we have that incentive. I think interoperability, however, is tremendously important. I think when we see our missions, we've worked with folks from all over the world, from the UAE to and beyond the United States, of course, Japan, Luxembourg. And so making sure everyone can speak the same technical language is important. But I think, as Fred just mentioned, when you're talking about these standards that take 3 to 5 even plus years to develop, and I think of the CONFERS model, this on-orbit servicing model, this is a real lift. When these ISAM standards are being developed, it took a lot of time and effort, and I think there needs to be, we need to make sure that there are, incentives aligned when certain government, contracts are out to help incentivize that. And that's, again, just a personal opinion. But when I was kind of reviewing this, I was struck, Mehek, from one of your Open Lunar fellows, Paulo from Volta Space. He kind of mentions this concept of, I don't think he says it just this way, but this concept of lunar babble I thought was interesting. Like, what if we see this world in which there are dozens of missions that are going to the moon that really can't talk to each other, that can't work with each other? The cost of lunar transportation is so tremendously high. This is such a big missed opportunity. I mean, to spend tens and tens of millions of dollars on these missions that cannot interface, that can't share power, that can't share communications, we are really shooting ourselves in the foot as a society and as a world if we're not able to leverage existing standards with each other. And I would say there's one final tension that I see, and that is, and maybe, Mehek, would have a better, and others would have a better response to this, but it's not clear to me that we know exactly what the USBC for a given standard is just yet. I think we are still in this embryonic phase of lunar exploration. We're still trying to learn a bit more about plume impingement and how big should our safety zones be, and what really is harmful interference. And so we're in this learning mode. And so I think there's another tension about defining standards too early and being too prescriptive too early that might lock us into some architectures that maybe are not, I don't know, that may not be the most ideal ones moving forward. So making sure that we start to having discussions like this, where we start loosely talking about these standards as these missions start becoming more and more successful, I think is tremendously important as well.
Yeah, that's true. And I also want to give the floor to Ulper, representing Adlac today. What is your opinion? How do you think interoperability done right look like?
Thank you, Ekaterina. It is an honor for me to be here today. I'm wearing the hat of ADLAC, which is an initiative belonging to the member states of COPUOS. It is led by the member states, and so it's not my opinion, but I can report a little bit what we have been doing at the UN regarding consultations on lunar activities. And I can share with you also the fact that interoperability is on our list of priority topics to be discussed in the future. So first, to start with, the Action Team on Lunar Activities Consultation is an initiative that has been adopted by the UN last year. UN COP was last June. And it is to have focused expert level exchanges to develop recommendations aiming at improving consultations related to lunar activities, considering different options, including, for instance, whether to recommend the establishment of international mechanisms. So building on what Marshall Hall was saying previously, member states of the UN COP was decided that there is a need to actually talk about this. And within its ATLAC, within the work of the ATLAC, the consultation is supposed to happen alongside the Article 9 of the Outer Space Treaty. And we are currently in the phase of developing the work plan for the next period, which actually has been endorsed. And it hasn't been endorsed. It has been approved informally by our members, and hopefully it will get endorsed next week when the COP was official plenary meeting starts. We are still working on our list of topics, as I was mentioning, and we have a couple of topics which are of interest to everyone. In fact, we just finished our intersessional meeting a couple of minutes ago. Our main topics, let's say, are related to consultation and awareness raising on the various lunar activities. Then we have information sharing, including knowledge sharing, international cooperation on lunar activities. We have a couple of member states which are talking about capacity building in various frameworks. Then we also have the topic of preservation of lunar activities, but linked to information sharing, and interoperability is on our list as well, but also linked to information sharing and consultation. With this in mind, I will add to our chat the websites where we can find all the documents and all the information shared by member states. And if there is any need for anything, I'm here to help. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much. Yeah, we'll discuss right now how the interoperability done right can look like for us. And I am wondering if we can use, lessons learned from our past experience. And I think, Fred, you are the best person to talk about it. Based on your long career of working, on technical standards, are there any existing solutions to some of our questions? Can we leverage something that we already have when still moving forward?
Yes, I would say a subgroup of this larger group, or someone somehow, or all of you, take a look at what exists in the world of standards today. There is a committee, the Consultative Committee for Space Data Systems. It's the acronym is CCSDS.org is the website. And this is an assembly of the space agencies of the world to develop data and information transfers, data and information transfer technical standards, so communications. They are double-hatted into ISO. So I mentioned earlier there were two subcommittees. This is one of them, and they've been around for about 40 years. And space agencies work together with industry. So you can go to that website and you can find all of the standards they have. There are 140 or something like that for different types of communication. That includes security, that includes cross support from different countries. So there's one place to go. And I think there are about 140 standards that you can look at in that environment, including wireless communication in space. So if you're using Bluetooth or something like that. On space systems and operations, those are listed on the ISO website. And while the CCSDS stuff is free to download, the ISO standards, unfortunately, come with a cost. It's like buying a textbook. But we have about 180 standards in that area. And those are broken down into design engineering, interfaces and verification, operations, environment, program management and quality, materials and processes, space debris or orbital debris, and then enterprise architecture, or enterprise standards. Those are accessible to you today. And there's work going on a number of standards that, for example, Confers came into that group and said, hey, we want some standards for on-orbit servicing. And that work has been brought forward. So that exists. That's something you can take today and start to look at how those fit and support the things that you need for the future and how you look ahead.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Seems like we have quite a solid ground to stand on, right?
Yeah.
We already have something to work with. And right now, when we talked about the standards, but at the same time, when we talk about the lunar activities database, there is I think, very nice connection to MIHAC and the Lunar Ledger project. So MIHAC, I'm quite interested, which information will be included first into the Lunar Ledger? What drove this minimum data fields? And is there anything that you probably left on purpose?
Yes. Thanks, Ekaterina. So yeah, the Lunar Ledger project, which is OpenLunar's flagship registry project, is launching in the fall. And I kind of want to go back to what Marcel was talking about the importance of interoperability now rather than later. When cost per kilogram is extremely expensive as it is now, it's actually much more important that every single asset is able to amplify and assist, for example, safety and mission assurance, the improve potential landings going forward. But there's no way to use architecture that already exists without interoperability. So a question that we often get is, which communications relays might be in orbit during certain missions? It's really hard to find information like that right now. And it's hard to know credibly when these missions will launch and when they'll be operational. So the Lunar Ledger solves that problem in the short term. Basically, we're creating a centralized place for information about missions to the moon. So we're especially interested in making sure that we're cataloging operational assets that are currently operational and will be operational or coming online within the next year or two. And we know, obviously, launch periods will slip, but trying to actually just gauge when certain missions will be online and when certain capabilities will be online. And to your question, which is very important, which are the records that we wanted to start with, which are the minimum data fields that we wanted to start with. We wanted to prioritize just a basic level of data fields that prioritizes operational safety and minimum coordination. So right now we've started with basic things like landing or impact coordinates, an orbital plane for any orbital assets, planned activity types, and the time frame of the operation of that asset, and then information about the operator or emergency contact information, and then general operational areas. Things that we've left out are detailed trajectories, payload specifications, and then end of life or disposal plans. We know that those are really incredibly important, but that building trust requires making sure that the initial data is super high value, and that we reduce any potential controversy regarding that information or data that is shared. So we make it super easy for actors to actually want to be part of the platform. So we're trying to make the barrier of entry really low. The other important thing is that it is completely modular and a voluntary platform. So we're reaching out to partners right now, commercial partners who are very eager to work with us because it's all up to them about what they share. And we're excited because starting with these minimum fields, allows us to open the door for contributors to share more over time. So we can eventually extend out into building an interoperable database where you might be able to, for example, as an operator, hey, maybe I can upload an idea for a standard for the radio that's going to be on this mission, right? Or I'm launching a relay. I want to upload a standard for how to talk to this relay if you're planning a mission in the future. So I think it's a really cool platform that will eventually, hopefully, open up the door to even initiating those conversations that need to be going on right now.
Yeah, you mentioned a lot of like this data fields are exactly what we need. And I think, when we also think about, having some kind of lunar activities database, one of the important factors is that we would like to avoid any kind of interference, right? If I have an operational mission on the moon, I don't want to interfere with other actors, right? And with that, I would like to move to Marshall. And I would love, Marshall, I would love to see your, like the basically operator's view of data gaps, how not to interfere with other actors' activities. I'm wondering if you can say really briefly, what kind of information you would need to get from other operators, and how early you need that information.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, thank you, Katerina. So I think, I think if the next few years, if we are successful in the next few years, and I mean we as the broader lunar community, I think it's tough for us to imagine. I mean, we can imagine it, but it's tough for us to appreciate the change and the amount of conflicting activity that is going to emerge. Right now, this concept that we could have, one rover that plugs into another lander seems, crazy when you think there's going to be 3 landers that are thousands of kilometers from each other. But a world in which you have, frequent transportation with Starship, and you have really hundreds of assets that are from I think that we see over 100 planned missions from maybe more than 35 different countries that are currently on the books right now. You're going to see a lot more conflicting issues. And I think one of the things that we'd like to start understanding and sharing early on, for example, is understanding plume impingement much better, especially when these larger scale landers really start touching down, kind of Starship and SpaceX Blue Origin classes start touching down. How much of this regolith is lofted? How much of it goes into the exosphere? Does that degrade the performance of other satellites that might be orbiting much closer to the moon than it would be on Earth? But I do want to kind of point to this idea, another tension that I see from the commercial side. And I really appreciate that Lunar Ledger has this de minimis start to try to build this idea. And that is these tensions between the importance of transparency and then the commercial value of proprietary data. So when we look at resource extraction, for example, on the moon, we would anticipate that understanding where resources are on the moon and at what grade these resources are going to be very potentially very beneficial and very valuable data. But because unlike in the terrestrial context, a lot of this data is not perishable, or rather, once you've assessed the moon, that pretty much is going to stay the same for a human lifespan. Understanding where you're targeting for a potential mission is, that's a huge competitive advantage, because we don't have a concept like in the terrestrial context where we can stake a claim and buy mineral rights or something like that. And so when we start, we can all agree that it's important to know, where is the mission happening? When is the launch occurring? What sort of operations are you going to undertake on this mission? But I think as these missions become increasingly complex and increasingly commercial, there's going to be a bit more uncertainty about how do we show all our cards, or how many cards are shared? And I don't have a great answer to this, but I see this as a tension between this OST vision of the moon as as much transparency as possible, which is incredibly important, but also the very more realistic need for commercial companies to have proprietary types of data, and whether that's mission location or the types of radios they're using or the types of propulsion systems they're using that gives them competitive advantages.
Okay, thank you so much, Marshall. And you mentioned a lot of really important topics in that. Yeah, that's true. A lot of commercial actors right now, they're quite hesitant about sharing the information because they, there is this connection to proprietary data, right? Ulpia, I want to go back to you and briefly discuss ATLAC. You know, you already mentioned like the core principles, what the ATLAC is doing, what at this stage they are right now. And I'm wondering when it comes to industry, how basically, what channels are you going to use to pull this, you know, knowledge from the industry, expert community knowledge into, you know, your discussions?
Thank you for the question. I think it's very important to have the industry, the academia, the community of experts involved in these activities related to ATLAC. Right now, we are still in this phase where the member states of the UN are still deciding upon our work plan and our list of potential priority topics for discussion. So once this stage is going to be fulfilled, hopefully next week when the COPO starts, we will have everything endorsed, and then the ATLAC itself will not be so connected to the member states, but more connected to the list of delegates that has been appointed to become members of this ATLAC. And that list is actually open to currently still to the member states, but the member states are in charge of actually choosing exactly what kind of people, institutions, industry, governmental, academia they want to have invited there in the list. In addition to that, we also will open the discussions in direct correlation to the topics that we will have to experts. So we will be soon inviting experts from all these various areas of life, so to say, to actually have their position expressed in ATLAC, but this is at the further stage. So we are still in the phase where we need to have this action team binded in with the mandate, with the terms of reference, with the work plan, and with the potential list of priority topics to be discussed in the future. And we are just now in this stage until the next week. Hopefully, after the COP was plenary, at the first intersessional we will have after the meeting, we will be able to announce more substantive door opening to the other areas of expertise. Thank you for the question.
Hey, Katrina, can I
Yeah.
can I piggyback on one of Marshall's comments?
Yeah, you can.
Thank you. You brought up a very important point, and that is intellectual property. One of the roles of a standard, Harvard Business School did a study several years ago in how that works, and controlling intellectual property inside an organization and how to work with the larger community where there's common intellectual property. And you can think of a technical standard as maybe a block of IP that's the interface between that public domain and the private community. And this is one reason I think commercial entities really need to be involved, because when you develop the standard in the language of that buffer zone, you are protecting their IP, but also giving them a way to engage with the larger community. And that's going to be very important for commercial actors going forward who want to show a return on investment, all of those business issues. So I wanted to throw that intellectual property block comment in at this point.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Yeah, that's incredibly important. We're almost coming to the yeah. Go ahead.
Sorry. I just realized I haven't mentioned all the categories. So academia, industries, NGOs like the Moon Village Association, experts and governmental entities. They will be all invited to have a say in the ATLAC in the future. Thank you.
Thank you so much. So I would like to, to finish this panel and to go to the Q&A. I propose you 2 very short questions, and I want you to, to answer in keywords, in a very short phrases, not a full sentences. But history shows us in many sectors that standards adoptions, need a credible steward. And I'm wondering what characteristics that body must have, in your opinion, whether it's UN or any other team. It doesn't matter for this question. What matters is what characteristics you're looking for. So give me the keywords. Who would like to start? Mihak, I see that you're thinking, so
Well,
let's go.
yeah, I don't know if I'll be able to do just a few words because I
Yeah.
think that it's important to look at historical analogs that have worked really well. And I think obviously Internet Protocol is a really great example of that. And that was started by a working group, really like similar to Logic or LSIC, and adopted through the Department of Defense and mandated. And then through a series of basically comments from the community, it was adopted and improved. So I think having like a general idea of collaboration and understanding that there are many different communities that all have different needs. So standards will need to be adopted and then probably reformed and adapted. I used to work as a payload manager in CLIPS programs. And I'll tell you right now, scientists and engineers speak very different languages. They do, because scientists have often grown up in like the 80s and 90s using many outdated standards, whereas engineers of today are using things that are very modular. So yeah, I don't know. I think there's an important, it's hard to say one or two things, but just being modular, adaptive, and open to comments from the community is really important.
That's really nice answer. Anyone else? Yeah, Freya, go ahead.
Okay, terms and definitions.
Okay.
Keywords.
Perfect.
Common
Perfect.
terms and definitions. Risk versus mission assurance. Two sides of the same coin.
Yeah, that's really nice. Thank you so much, risk versus. Ulpi and Marshall, do you want to add a couple words here? Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I would say that we all agree that we have to start from having a common understanding. And I think our work in ATLAC starts from this understanding that we need to create this common understanding by, of course, talking. And the first step is actually to create the structure, which is supposed to be transparent enough and inclusive enough to integrate various languages, needs, communities, as previously mentioned. So consultation, I would say, as a keyword.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Marshall, what is your keyword?
Oh, I'm not sure I have a keyword, but I think I'm struck that we need to find this balance between having the standard be prescriptive and rigid enough that it matters, that it's not nothing, but at the same time, it needs to be responsive to a 5-person lunar infrastructure startup that has this pre-seed that it's to have it's a tough ask to ask a small startup like that who has they're trying to see like can we hire 1 additional or 2 additional engineers to get some SBIR funding to spend this additional time and money adhering to these standards. So I think making sure the standard is rigid enough that it matters, but it's light enough that every actor is able to build this in. And Fred, I think I'm really struck by this concept of like that you kind of said is how does the standard enable commercial and is not an impediment to it. I think that's how we should frame this.
I think the words you're looking for are balance of cooperation and competition.
Yes.
So balance is the,
That's a very nice summary. And we also, for example, some of you mentioned incentives. You, Fred, and you, Marshall, you mentioned incentives, and I'm wondering what actually helped the undecided players to join. Marshall, you mentioned that there should be some financial incentive. So I'm wondering any other views right now, what kind of incentive? It can be technical, maybe reputational, maybe Marshall, as you say, financial, but what actually helped to undecided players to join the standards?
Yeah, like one thing that comes to mind right now, when things are incredibly risky, right? Like how do we build resilience through interoperability? I think there needs to be a clear conversation around that, because every single landing right now is incredibly risky. And if we had some modicum of data exchange with the assets that are on the lunar surface or orbiting around the lunar surface, thinking about how to make infrastructure that builds upon itself, right? The thing is that because there's so many diverse actors, that is going to require cooperation. So I think this balance of cooperation and competition, the incentive is that if we don't prove that this is getting less risky over time as a community, the funding goes away, right? Because there won't be the clear demand signal to the market that this is a viable commercial opportunity. So I think we need to start having a conversation about that as a community, which is like, how do we start just working together to think about reducing the risk across the entire endeavor through interoperability?
Yeah, that's true. Anyone else would like to contribute? And we will move to the Q&A. Yeah, go.
Sorry. I've worked on a number of programs over the years. And part of the reason I work in the area of technical standards is because 80 or 90% of the programs I worked on, from small ones to very large ones, have been canceled after the investment of a lot of money. And what happens is that governments put a lot of money into these big programs, but they don't necessarily take the time to work in the standards community. And when 3 billion or 4 billion is spent and the program goes away, everything evaporates. So taking the mindset for this group that maybe this group will succeed, but perhaps not, and that's very real. But to make sure that the information that is collected from this group is captured somewhere, and I think technical standards are a good place. Also talks about the point you were just bringing up, about the risk on landing, for example, and what were the conditions that made that landing fail. And maybe it was a navigation thing. There was a signal loss at a certain critical time or something like that. Identifying the problems is just as important as identifying the solutions. So maybe spending time talking with a group, not about what the solution has to be, but what are the problems you had when your company tried to land on the moon? What are the problems your company had when there was a second stage launch failure and you didn't make orbit, but then maybe you did later? Problems are, I think, a rich area for discussion, and perhaps will lead to, a very fruitful look at what can be standardized for a common good.
Yeah, certainly. So,
Now.
would be Marshall, if you want to say something.
He's muted.
Yeah, you muted.
Sorry, I double unmuted. I muted and unmuted. No, I think Fred, you're right. I think this is having transparency and sharing lessons learned from all of across everybody is super important. And again, I'm speaking not from the perspective of the company, but from an observer who's kind of been in this mix for a while now. I think we are seeing this concept that I think that really SpaceX has pioneered, that we need to iterate and move forward, and as we would say, never quit the lunar quest. Have to have that resolved, that we need to push forward as a community, I think is important. And the only way we're going to get there is by is picking ourselves up and working together, both as competitors in some aspects, but also at the end of the day, we all want to see this vision of a thriving like lunar exploration ecosystem across the entire world, and it's only going to happen if we work together.
True. Totally true. Would be a couple of words from you. What are the incentives do you think that help undecided players to join?
Yeah, thank you. I think building on the previous speakers, I think it's really, and on what I said previously, having a common understanding does not come from out of nowhere. It comes from discussions, right? It comes from this community of various entities which meet, organize themselves as a platform to discuss ideas, operations, lesson learned, issues for the future. And I think if it would be something interesting to have as an outcome. Maybe the first step would be actually to organize ourselves a little bit better, and perhaps out of this organization, like however informal that might be, we could learn from one another in such a way that it will lead actually to technical standards. But until we get there, we really need to gather and talk about it. And I think that would be the very easy and straightforward outcome of our discussion here today. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Rupert. Thank you so much for all of our experts for participating in this panel. I'm going to move to the Q&A. I'm going to go to the chat and see if we have any questions. There is a lot of links, so I'm going through them. Okay, links. I think one of the first questions are actually directed to Fred Slane. This is the question from Lufuna Chikalanje. For I am attending here representing Orzur.co.za. I'm a member of the National Standard Board Information Technology Technical Committee as a national expert, by extension participating at ISO JTC 1/IEC. I would like to learn more in terms of collaboratively taking the work of the outer space interoperability and technology standards forward through the ISO supported by national standard bodies. How do we begin this conversation at the national level, and what are your thoughts?
Each individual works within a country structure. So understanding who your contacts are in your country, your national standards body, is important. Getting in touch with people who are working in the community, I might be one of them, who can connect you with a country representative. Occasionally we run into areas where there's an overlap of work between space systems and operations in another group. For example, we are doing work on some work on navigation that is starting to branch into not just terrestrial reconnaissance for mapping, but also into lunar. And so there are different bodies, the Geophysical Society, USGS have experts. So it can be a very complex network. I would say that an important thing is to start to understand the network that exists and building on that, and then finding your voice within that group.
Yeah. Thank you so much. Really nice advice. I see that Glavki raised hand. Glavki, maybe it's because you want to ask people to rename this themselves, right?
Exactly, yes. There's directions in the chat.
Yeah, please, everyone, if your name that is, you see in that Zoom is not actually your name, please rename itself back to your name, to your actual name. I'm going to go through the chat to see like everything that's written there. Someone wrote that while I was at NASA, they did a broad survey of people perception of interference and data gaps, and ended up publishing much of this both at IEC and in the PhD dissertation, since the work at NASA is not continuing. So there is a link in the chat, so everyone who's interested. There is also a comment connected to Logic. I think that Logic should encourage commercial operators to send more data to COSPER. At the last LSIC meeting, there were complaints that the US CLIPS reports to COSPER were mostly contact operator, which doesn't seem optimal to me. And there is the whole discussion. Okay, thank you so much. John Reed says, thanks for it. Keeping the standards focused on interfaces and supporting secondary operation is the key facet for the conversation. Another thought this person would like to suggest that the focus on missions versus commercial activities and operations. Governments and agencies think in terms of missions, when commercial industry focus shifts toward financially viable operations. Ulpira, would you like to comment on something?
And not on this. I know
Okay.
that our time is running out. I just wanted to build again on my previous comment on actually having some sort of gathering, community gathering, however you want to call it. And this is because I have noticed that some organizations which are I'm part of the organizers here, are having this US centric perspective. And taking my UN hat, I know that there are a lot of other opinions in the world, and there are many other voices that needs to be integrated into this in order to have like this common approach, common understanding. And so I wanted to suggest that perhaps MVA as being the pivotal point with regards to the point of contact with the International Moon Day, maybe one of the platforms that could develop this consultations further on. So I wanted to have this reflected in the conversation before the time runs out. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Rupe. That's great. It's important to employ the approach when everyone can contribute, from different parts of this world, from different sectors of a more broader space sector. Yeah, and I also see that people in the chat following this discussion saying that identifying problems is more important than just solutions. After all, you have to know what the problem you are solving. That's right. We also have a question for Marcel. From industry perspective, what makes you willing to share information like in a database? Does it need to be in international or domestic law? Does it help?
I think that's I think businesses respond to incentives fundamentally, and I think you're kind of ultimately financial incentives, and there's a lot of things that make up financial incentives. From my personal perspective, I think that we see a lot of I think a lot about like the space debris problem as an analogy, and this concept that we are now trying to unwind a lot of actions that were taken many decades ago without a tremendous amount of forethought, and the difficulty of moving that inertia that and if we can get ahead of that and have safe and responsible operations as much as possible from the beginning, I think that creates a much more it reduces risk to everybody. Now, is that going to impact the next few years? I think probably not. But when that inflection point hits that I was speaking about earlier, when you start having this vision that we all hope to have, as dozens of missions landing on the moons simultaneously, I think rather quickly we're going to see we're going to have wished that we created a structure and a norm to start sharing this information.
Thank you so much for your answer. There are also some comments. I will briefly, in terms of making infrastructure that builds upon itself, we have rovers that are designed to do exactly that. The problem with the rovers is that they are not specialized. They are generous to us, much like construction equipment. Okay, I don't see any other questions in the chat, like direct questions. So thank you so much to our experts for their time, for their point of views, and for the answers to our questions. Right now, we're going to be moving to mirror boards to breakout rooms, but first I would like to show you what we're going to do so everyone understands. So I will unpin people. Thank you so much again for your perspective. Takes a little bit of time. Yeah. And let me share. Oh, you can see it. Okay, we transition to the breakout rooms and mirror boards. How does it look like? Right now, we will divide everyone into the breakout rooms. It will be automatically done because the questions in the breakout rooms are all the same, so it doesn't matter to which breakout room you are going to. This is how mirror board looks like. Don't be afraid. Every room will have a moderator, and if you experience any kind of problems, the moderator will help you. Breakout room mirror boards consist of 10 questions. There is a question 0, basically your name. If you would like to, to share your favorite sci-fi movie, we would be happy. You'll have the stickers for your ideas. What you do, you take the sticker and you bring it to this frame under the respective question, and you write your idea there. There are also stars very close to each frame. And if you're really fond of a specific answer, a specific idea, you can put the stars very close to it so we can understand what ideas are more liked by the community. We will have 40 minutes questions to go through all the questions, to put our ideas really briefly, and another 10 minutes with your mirror boards to summarize the discussion, to basically understand what was mentioned and why, and what kind of next actions you would like to, start doing. So that's it. I'm stopping to share, and I will right now create breakout rooms. So, Marshall team, how many rooms we would like to create? I see 48 people. So maybe we can create 5 breakout rooms. I think it would be enough. Or would you like to go with 6?
I agree, 5 is good.
Okay, 5 is good.
And then while Ekaterina is doing that, I've worked in the mirror boards before, and one of the things that I always get messed up with is the scrolling. And so when you click the arrow on the left, then you have a hand that allows you to move and scroll. If you hold down Control and you use your up or down arrows, then you can zoom in or out. I find that makes it a lot easier to understand the mirror boards. And then also, when you first come into the mirror boards, you often have to move to the left or the right to find the content.
To pause the recording for now, we will not be recording anything in the breakout rooms. We will resume the recording as soon as we come back from the breakout. I think right now it's working, right? The recording is working. Perfect. While there are some people who are still joining us, here it is. So right now, what we're gonna do, I'm gonna explain the process a little bit. Yeah, we're gonna present the outcomes, how it's gonna be done. Every breakout room had a moderator. And right now, moderator will try to summarize as much as possible in this short time, but briefly give the summary of ideas that have been discussed in the breakout rooms for every question. We'll do it in a very short manner, approximately 4 to 5 minutes per one moderator. And for message for moderators, I would like for you to focus your attention on the question number 10. This is exactly when we're deciding what will be the next steps. And after that, we will move to the Q&A open floor session where everyone will have an opportunity to raise their hand and express their opinion, propose something new maybe. And we will finish it with a conclusion and next steps. So this is the plan. And we're gonna be starting it just right now. I think, yeah. Do you think we should share this slide, or should I not be sharing anything?
My recommendation would be for each moderator to share their desktop as they show the mirror board for their breakout group.
We can do that. I will stop sharing and I can start sharing. So I can start the conversation. I can share the mirror board for the breakout room 1. 1 minute. Perfect. Hope you see it.
We got it.
Okay, you got it. Perfect. I will try to. Yeah. That's a very long mural board. Yeah, that's it. So let's. The bracket room 1, we had an amazing team with really good ideas, actually, and I will try to summarize as much as I can, but there is a lot of it. Just the first one, I think the most popular movies and TV series following Kind, Expanse, and Interstellar. So we agree on this. At least something we agree on. In the first question, when we were asking what are the most urgent challenges, lots of challenges were mentioned, starting from surface plume interaction, to lack of rules to protect investment on the service, being able to provide any kind of help to others in the context of outer space treaty, lack of shared predictive modeling for environmental impacts, especially surface plume interactions, electromagnetic responses. There were concerns about the distance interference, constraints, and context required between elements for various activities performed, desire to build reliability over time, and risk acceptance. We are going at a very difficult environment, and of course, this poses some risk, and we need to let others know our plans and operational areas. For the question number 2, we asked what specific types of data should be included to ensure we actually capture and prevent these harmful interferences. There were mentions of boundaries around areas of operation, landing location, expected route to be traveled, or operating area, planned activities, period of performance. You can also see here like landing site coordinates, timing, plume modeling data, surface alteration metrics, comms frequencies, time of use logs, radiation emissions, shared hardware compatibility specs, and basically any activity, location, area, definition of it, length of time, any kind of requested spectral emissions, disclosure of expected hazards, descriptions of activity, breakdown of the element that are participating within the activity, and the post-activity impact. We were also, of course, we're discussing who should own or oversee the database. Someone proposed Lunar Development Cooperative, basically an entity that provides infrastructure to users. Someone proposed a multilateral independent coordinating body under COSPER UN Space Governance Extension with equal seats for government, commercial, and academic sectors. So basically, we want to prevent nationalization and preserve credibility. International non-governmental organization, maybe standards organization, and there were specific mention that it shouldn't be UN because they don't act maybe timely enough, and the discussions can be very long. That was the main concerns, and people wanted for the data to be shared across multiple platforms. Maybe AI can be part of this. Maybe AI can manage all the interactions. We also discussed one should be one database on multiple, and actually there were 2 opinions. One is the single database, which will be efficient, less overhead. Some people were saying that one database maybe is not realistic because there are many actors on the moon with different purposes. And there were a really nice proposal for the federated architecture. So one international schema and access point, but layered and specialized models for example, propulsion, counts, surface operations, and etc. etc. For the question number 5, how we can ensure that everyone basically agree on single database. There were a lot of ideas, starting from standards for common language, common definitions, that we need to accept the risks, and perhaps the way to promote it, maybe that the database can help to find customers, suppliers, or partners. Data storage should be made available to all the participants, and we can adopt permission interoperability compliance similar to launch licensing, for example, like this. We also discussed how the data should be validated or verified. Maybe it can be tiered validation model like self-reported data, then peer-confirmed data, and the ground truth conferred via lander orbital imaging. Maybe there should be a moderator that basically reviews the data and reviews the provider. Or maybe it also depends on the data type, what it is required to verify or validate. Maybe it can be accreditation by an oversight body. Question number 7. There were proposed CCSDs, protocols for comms, calls for planetary protection policies, NASA SPA, phase and documentation, ITU spectrum coordination. There were again discussion that it should be incorporated the data into the launch license, and there were also proposed care principles for indigenous data governance. What funding mechanism, and maybe there were discussed some, maybe can be included as part of the government budget. Maybe it can be hybrid model, for example, tiered subscriptions, agency-backed grants, public-private partnerships, incentivized participation with early access privilege, any kind of, like database integrated services. And the very important part that we need to incentivize participation. And maybe we can couple it with disincentives. Maybe we can deny access to data or services for non-participation. But of course, this is to be discussed. And what is coordination system? Do we need to, to ensure alignment? There were proposed lunar operations conflict prevention framework, basically forum with technical working groups, dispute resolution mechanism, and shared forecasting tools, and maybe outer space treaty, Artemis Accords, and China-Russia International Lunar Research Park Agreement. The most important question number 10. What concrete steps? There were a lot of proposals, as you see, and the main one we need to start. We don't need to wait for everyone to join. We need to start building right now. There were a lot of proposals to build on the Open Lunar database. It's a start and promote it, publish it, combine with the UN parameters. We need to probably establish a forum, evolvable and bootstrapable, and giving community the tools to coordinate. We need to have coordination mechanisms for activities for, that is easy to use, open and evolvable. And there were plans like launching a working group, set a 1-year timeline to draft a shared schema, hold quarterly reviews, publish open source toolkits, establish a recognition or compliance badge system for early adopters. And some of the members mentioned that they're gonna be using Open Lunar Registry, particularly Open Lunar Ledger, for their activities. I think that's it for the record room 1.
Should we
Maybe
transition
we can-
to room 2?
Kristen.
Yeah, room 2. This is Kristen.
Yep. Just give me one moment.
Yeah,
Okay.
you can see it.
Perfect. So I was in room 2. We had a small but active group of participants. While we have a variety of science fiction preferences, Star Trek: The Next Generation seems to take the lead, which I'm excited about because that one's my favorite. In the area of challenges, I think in summary, all the post-it notes kind of lead to one main point, which is that the moon still has so many unknowns. And so sharing data is essential, especially because a lot of people are trying to go to the same place or near to each other. And one person's failure can impact all of the others in the area. And so we think that that's, one of the key challenges is that the failures of others can have detrimental impacts, to other assets on the moon. Oops. For the second question, what kinds of data should we be sharing? I think a lot of what we talked about was also talked about by the panelists. My video is not on, my apologies. But I think there was a distinction made, that we need to be sharing information before we go. So our launch window, maybe our intended path, our landing site, or whatever we can convince people to give that is not gonna, take away their commercial advantage. But that there's also information that can be shared after the mission ends, such as hazards that they encountered or space weather that they encountered or environment that they encountered that could be useful to other individuals participating in the database. And there's also a reminder that we should not forget about the humans that may be on the moon. I know that sometimes we focus on, topics just about like technology assets that are on the moon, but there could be people are important assets on the moon too, and we need to make sure that we take care of them and keep them safe. For question 3, the main takeaways here are, who should be owning and overseeing this database is that we would like it to be international and independent and neutral, and a party that can be trusted. That's a big ask, but that is the ask that our group has. We spent a lot of time talking about the ITU, the International Telecommunications Union, as they have a different agenda and purpose, but they're a group, and we were wondering, why is this group successful? And one of the things we talked about is it's been all around for a long time. And they've been, building on their processes for a long time. And, that's why they're probably a well-oiled operation right now. And so, but we're talking about something from the extreme opposite. We're talking about something, from the very beginning. And so that kind of leads to the next question, question 4, should there be one database or multiple databases? And I think we all agree that, in the end, we would love to have one database, and that is a very optimistic viewpoint. And to the point that the last group made with like just start, right? Maybe it's easier to begin with multiple databases because there are different people and they may not all have the same level of trust, and maybe they would feel more comfortable engaging with one database versus another. So there is this push-pull between the utopian version and what it takes to just get going. And we talked about too, like the timeline for some of these items, and to get to the utopian vision, also some of the other issues that came up in the later questions, who's going to be funding this or whatever. Some of these paths are really long. The way that these organizations operate, it takes time. And so how do you balance that with like just getting started? We agreed that, I'm going to skip because I'll be honest, we did not get to all of the questions, but our main takeaways were, think about the timeline of these items when you are suggesting the approach. We think that incentives were challenging. It's going to be hard to get people to join and to share their information. So in terms of funding, how easy is it going to be to ask someone to share their data and then their money? So it's to be like, give us your money and then you can share your data with us. That's a tough ask. So there were conversations about what other alternative, ways can we fund this. Some of the topics that came up was, having a country, like a government of a country, pay for their members of their country to participate rather than charging an individual organization a fee. With that comes maybe more overhead and more time, but it was an alternative that was discussed. As far as about verifying and validating the accuracy of the data, we didn't have much to say about that other than there's probably an example from another organization or another database that we should be using. And, let's see, I think that's a summary. Yeah. So keep all these things in mind, consider utopian versus what can actually get us there in the next steps, and take that into consideration when you're deciding on your funding approach and whatnot. That's a summary for group 2.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Kristen. I think we can move to the room 3. Jason.
Yep. Oh, yep. There you go. There it's showing. So room 3, we had a small group. Not everyone put their names here, but they're pretty active discussion going on. Seems like a good percentage like Star Wars. Not even going to go which trilogy, so we'll move on. Our first question, a lot of discussion centered around position, navigation, and timing. mostly for coordination or safety. How do you track things? And like we didn't get through all of our questions, but most of the discussion sort of touched on each concepts of each question as we went along. So I might not be directly answering the question, but we'll sort of touch on what we talked. But some of the focus is, how do you know where things are? It's correctness and timeliness of certain information, and who is responsible for that. Are there standard ways of answering that things, as well as coordinating sort of confliction between prioritization of resources or even landing sites? But mostly it's, where are assets on the lunar surface or in orbit, and how do you ensure that you can either avoid them for safety reasons or utilize them? So we went on to the second section where, you know, what is do no harm? A lot of it is having people define protocols, a method of recording activities before they happen, or just a understanding of allocations of functions to certain areas. So like a science instrument won't be placed next to a RSRU plant, or when can certain things be activated at what levels, or what kind of activities are going to be defined, or how do you ensure certain frequencies are understood or utilized properly. We kind of got sticky when we went to see who should oversee all of this, but what emerged are capabilities of, say, blockchain technologies and applications. That still goes into who's responsible. So even with a solution of blockchain, of like verifying and validating who has access to certain data components, someone has to maintain, say, like a wallet of who has there, as well as certain parameters that are involved with that. But that does give a means of sort of decentralizing responsibility, and allowing for sort of those that provide information and access information a level of control as to what they're seeing. It doesn't kind of address the correctness of the data. We kind of go through that in, I guess, question 4 and 5, but the correctness of the data and timeliness of the data are still issues, and a means of communicating and updating. In terms of a unified centralized database, I think Kristen touched upon it, is there's nothing wrong with duplication, because there are different applications for data sets, but there needs to be a means of sort of figuring out the data is consistent, and truthfulness and rightness or timeliness of the data. How that's organized could be done by, again, function or top level responsibility, depending on how that data is being used. And there's different ways of manipulating data as you go along. Question 5, all stakeholders. Again, it seems like a lot of implementation is done by specific purpose. And there are means of identifying standards by usage, and there's different regulations for things. How do we centralize that, or like build a hierarchy of responsibility? I don't think we had a clear understanding of how to accomplish that, but there's certain technologies would allow for, again, anyone to sort of voice their opinion as to how their data is being used, or what data they need in this architecture. But a centralized one database for all might be a outdated term, but the access to information and how that's accessed is something worth exploring. Again, the timeliness, how do you go against bad actors, and how do you know if someone's not intentionally giving you false information? There needs to be an explanation of current technology capabilities of doing so, as well as a forum for doing that. But that kind of hints at a governing body that sort of facilitates or moderates any of this kinds of discussion. So like I said, we didn't really get through all. The last thing that we were able to discuss through is a lot of this is mainly volunteer information by entities of various levels, at least for the development and technical level. Open sourcing certain capabilities that that don't interfere with like IP might be a way of advancing quickly, but we didn't have enough time to kind of go into those details. But the sentiment is sort of similar to the other working groups so far, and you know, that's all I have. Unless anyone in my group wants to kind of speak up, but there is a lot of tracking and talking of how the data should be used and the uses for it.
Very good. Thank you so much, Jason. The room number 4 team.
Thank you. Okay. So we also had very good discussion. Here's our participants. I agree with the Star Trek, Next Generation, Deep Space Nine, so that's great. Question 1, urgent challenges, hazards and interference, conjunction, conflicts on landing sites. We did have a good conversation about, yes, harmful interference is an important goal, but we should be pushing towards active interoperation as well with the database. And then also a good discussion around, hey, the first generation of operations, the first set of missions that require interoperability, we should be focused on not the things that are happening near term with a growth path to what we want to happen long term. So evolving a framework was a good discussion. Question 2, specific types of data. Form, fit, and function. Location was a big one. I'm a big proponent of contact information for the different organizations based upon my experience. Frequency as well as the bandwidth that you're using. Locations of not just your lander, but cables and traffic corridors. And also, how much of the surface area do you need and for how long? That was a great contribution from the group. As well as we had a conversation about, hey, are there stay out zones for scientifically interesting areas? On question 3, who should own or oversee the database? And we kind of tumbled to nonprofits should own the database. We had a good conversation about ATLAC and UN and COPUS. But one of the key concerns here, and this is another question, but it came up here, is what is the funding source for curating a database? And the UN is having funding issues, and so that we need to keep that in mind. So that was something interesting I hadn't thought about. Also, another mention of the Lunar Development Cooperative idea that's out there. So very much focused sort of on an international nonprofit. Question 4, one database or specialized databases. And here we were using the Open Lunar Foundation's work in that, yes, there needs to be a top level, very accessible database, but it seems like that we may need sort of a tiered system where there are sub databases with more detail feeding the top tier database. And so, and like there might be country level databases with more information shared that then certain subsets of that data are in the core unified database. We might need to have firewalls and things. So that was a good discussion as well. I hadn't thought about the idea of having a multi-tier set of databases, but it makes sense. All right, question 5, how can we ensure all stakeholders contribute? And the big thing here that we talked about was, hey, there's got to be value back to the community and to the operator. So I think that is a big focus that we need to have, is what value are we providing such that people participate. I think, and we also had discussions around, hey, we need to have community consensus around the importance of collecting this data and the value of that data. So building that community consensus, I think that's one of the objectives of this workshop. But I think that as we get to what are the next steps, I think showing the value and building the community is really important. All right, question 6, data verified and validated. Is sort of a multiple thing in that, hey, probably the best thing is for operators to be responsible for their own data entry, but there also needs to be some curation. So a trust but verify. If there's multiple data sets that can be fused to validate data, that's excellent. We talked about the for Earth orbit, how amateur astronomers are doing satellite watching and posting data to the internet, and that something like that can be a good check to make sure that the operators are putting in accurate data. Question 7, existing policies, norms, technical standards. There's a lot here, from CCSDS to LUNATET to ECSS, lots of acronyms, Artemis Accords, ILRS, ISAM, standards development. So there's a lot to build on here, and in some ways that may be too many. Question 8, funding mechanisms. I talked about user fees, talked about membership incentives, tiered benefit, talked about nonprofit donation, so Wikipedia model. Clearly funding is going to be something we need to work. Beyond the database, what's governance coordination systems do we need to prevent conflicts and foster collaboration? So certainly there's the Artemis Accord and the ILRS mechanisms, but also, hey, there's a large issue in that we need a community process for refining behaviors and norms. Is that ACLAC? I think there's opportunity there. There's the AIAA Luniverse construct. And so there are other things out there. And so from a question 10, what concrete steps? So one of the things was, there are a number of stakeholder and associations. There's 3 here that are running this workshop, and of course then there's Open Lunar, and so we need to create connective tissue between all of these related efforts. We need to understand who are all these stakeholders, who does what. Maybe we need an association of association. And then also we talked about, hey, we need to keep this conversation going. Each organization has a little bit of funding. How do we combine that funding to operationalize what we're talking about? Do we need a conversation at IAC? How can we create this connective tissue? Do we need another organization that is has as members all these other different organizations like Moon Village and LSIC and Logic? Very good discussion here about how to create this connective tissue and how do we get a community consensus. Okay, I think that covers it.
Thank you so much, Tim. Amazing. I see that, how from one breakout room to another, there are ideas that you're repeating again and again. So that's really good. And let's go to the final room. Marshall, you have an opportunity
Everyone.
to speak.
Yes. Can you see my screen?
Yes, we can see it.
Great. So we had a great breakout room. We have participation from across the US, Canada, and in South Africa. So when we looked at the most urgent challenges or the most pertinent challenges addressing this, we thought it was what we call low N or small data set. We just don't have that much experience in place on what what would drive what is necessary for this. Also, that the data cost can be prohibitive potentially. I think this goes back to more what Tim was saying about ultimately who's going to be funding a lot of this creation. We had one individual, Dawn, who mentioned this upcoming AI and how does AI affect the space interoperability challenge, or concepts like human-machine teaming and autonomous systems and automation. On question 2, we looked at the specific types of data. I think similar to a lot of the other groups, we thought, telemetry and diagnostic data, schedules and mission areas of stakeholders, and when we get into this idea of error codes, or where are these cameras, so that we can normalize, looking at different camera views. On who should oversee it, this is, what kind of struck me a lot from our conversation is this concept of the decentralized versus the centralized database. So, we seek to find these analogies, right? Like, or systems like blockchain or like Wikipedia, these highly decentralized databases. But that's one way of getting at it. But we talk about having some governing body that's much more centralized. We didn't have a great answer to that. For 4, we think a single database would be useful, but it reminds me a lot of that XKCD about standards creation. It feels like, everyone wants to create one database, but you end up just creating a bunch of different databases. On 5, how do we ensure accountability to this? One idea a member had was the idea of mandating, through the United States. And I think Therese brought this up in a comment during the panel discussion. In the United States, there is not really a mechanism to mandate or authorize space missions to do certain things beyond, the FCC license, for example, or beyond the FAA launch license. So in the United States, as we think about what would mission authorization mean, and what is a holistic mission authorization framework, maybe we should consider some sort of mandate or to register with such a database. I think data validation is a big issue. I've seen this out in the wild as well, where some databases just have incorrect information. And so one idea would be to create, on the de minimis side, design reference entries, some example mission that shows exactly how how the data should be cleaned, and then perhaps we could verify a limited number of users for each company, and after they could be approved, they could post this data. But the challenge is again, how do you incentivize companies to when missions change? Deadlines often shift around. A lot of this has to do with the unique landing requirements of the moon. So if you miss your landing date and you can't land at lunar dawn anymore, you might slip quite a bit. And so how do we make sure that all this stuff is up to date? On question 7, one interesting thought was, to what extent do standards codify existing norms of behavior versus prescribe in a normative sense at, how you should behave? And I think that's an interesting tension. One of our members or several of our members have backgrounds in architecture and construction, and they compared it to the International Building Code, and how a lot of that was generated was really writing down what was accepted practice at the time. This is, for example, I believe the example was, what is the height of stair, like how high should steps be? And there was not, that was done because just as we developed buildings, a universal norm of how high a step should be was generated instead of being prescribed by a committee. And then we talk about rules written in blood. This is more, again, as accidents happen, we continue to learn. For 8, funding, is a big issue. We threw out, what if there's a lot of interest in the philanthropy space? Why not some sort of high net worth individual, especially as we don't see this as being a particularly expensive endeavor compared to maybe other space missions. But we also discuss ideas like commercial subscriptions under an open source style license, and maybe government funding. Maybe as these missions become more common, potentially there could be some sort of a small fee. I think we're already hearing this in, Texas is talking about this. There are all sorts of philosophical and political implications of that, but perhaps some sort of fee model could work as well. And then beyond the database, we were looking at common docking handling and interface structures. How can you share power and data in a contact-based way? Can we piggyback on top of international conferences to make sure that to create this interface? I think the virtual idea is a great idea, but how can we partner with IAF and others to really knit together these international connections? And in terms of concrete steps, I think we all agree we need to set standards around the data collection. And one of our members talks about, Nexus Aurora is where they community fund projects and try to solve problems internationally. So Ilho, I think that was you. I think you're, I think you wrote that. So overall, I think this was a fantastic. It was great to see all these different ideas from these other working groups as well, and that's definitely sparked us to think about this in different ways that I think we didn't quite anticipate.
Thank you so much, Marshall. I'm really happy to see so many interesting ideas in these mirror boards, and just want to say everyone that we're gonna analyze it and we're gonna put everything into the relatively short reports, and you will get this report to your respective email address with the one that you registered for this workshop. For now, I am proposing to open basically like town hall discussion. Everyone is welcome to comment. Maybe we missed something, and I would love to get maybe feedback from the community on what should be the next steps after this workshop.
Ekaterina, this is Kristen. I was just going to ask, is it possible to leave the mirror boards open?
Yes. The mirror board will be open for the next couple of days. So everyone is welcome, to go to their respective mirror board and add some details if they would like to. Certainly.
Thank you.
So one piece of feedback, I've been taking notes on the common things that we're hearing from the different mirror boards, and some of the interesting ideas that were generated. So one was the idea of a multi-tier database. Another was the idea that I was not really expecting, expressing some skepticism about the UN being having the lead in the database. So that was good. I hadn't really thought about funding and the issues around there. And then I think the last one was about the need to build a community that recognizes the importance of value and talks about what is the value of being interoperable and being able to communicate with one another. And then also acknowledging that there's lots of different organizations in everyone's countries, and then at the international level, and there isn't a consensus leader right now. And so what I'd like for us maybe to talk about a little bit and get folks' thoughts is how do we build that community? Should there be an organization that makes that connective tissue between all of the different organizations? So I'm interested to hear folks' thoughts around that.
Yeah, that's a very good question.
Tim, one thing I would add to that is I'm finding the conversations occurring in a lot of different forums. And so I don't think we can be prescriptive on how you join or who can talk as much as we need to be creating that draw for people to join.
And how do we create that draw?
I think to your point, or the point in our conversation, it's around creating value. Whoa, that sunlight is bright. It's hitting my keyboard and reflecting. If we're having the conversations that are actually moving our teams forward, I think that becomes the juice that we're getting out of the squeeze that other people will see the value in. And so it's how do we enable constructive progress around the teams that are actually trying to do things at the moon, or finding people to engage to go that want to be able to create value at the moon. And so it's going to be, I think, those kind of outcomes we need to be focused towards.
That's good feedback.
Anyone else would like to express their opinions? I see something in the chat from Rifuna Chikalanji. I would suggest that the next step should be to share the final report before submission to the UN, so that we can review and add more inputs when necessary. Alternatively, we can have a follow-up session where the report will be shared and we can give live inputs. I would also suggest that we start acting on the recommendations made for numbers 7 and 10 as the baseline. So we should have a working committee. Okay. As part of this workshop, we're going to be providing a report that basically will summarize all the points of view and opinions expressed during the workshop and in the breakout rooms. And certainly all of you will receive it. We can think about if there is a necessity, to provide any kind of live inputs. Yeah. Someone asking, was AI discussed as a tool to facilitate? Actually, in Breakout Room 1, there were people mentioning that maybe AI can be used as a tool specifically for basically some kind of management / facilitation. But we also mentioned that, there are IP issues, and we need to be 100% sure that we want, that people are comfortable sharing it with AI. But that's possible.
Yeah, there was the comment that, a lot of these discussions are happening in a lot of different forums. So even if some of those are closed forums, maybe opening up an AI agent to those to scrape data from those and news sources to then compile some of this might be an interesting method to ensure that kind of participation by force happens. That it's not manual input, and it's a little bit more agnostic as well, and just truly open source because it's scraping from either groups that have opened up or from open news sources.
Thank you so much. That's actually a really nice idea. I think, it's always a big struggle. I think it's not only for the space sector, but for many others, that there are similar type of conversations happening in different places and different groups. And of course, it's really hard for humans to trace absolutely all of them. So yeah, I agree. AI agent to gather all conversations, to put it in one place to analyze, summarize it, would be quite an interesting idea. Okay, thank you so much, Mihak. We were very happy and excited, to have Open Lunar with us today. Yeah. Any other comments, opinions? Maybe there is a specific thing that you're really passionate about, that you want to raise a specific issue with us right now.
I just wanted to thank you, Irina, for your excellent job facilitating this.
Oh, yes, you've put so much work into this. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, I think that, concerning the report, I think, and Tim, you also mentioned it, that we need to to understand how we can talk with each other. There are many organizations, many existing standards for different things. And there is ATLAC, there is Open Lunar, there is GEGSLA, there is Logic, LSIC, and many other organizations who are somehow either interested in interoperability, right, or interested in cooperation, and etc., etc. So it would be also nice to understand how we can basically maybe provide a forum for everyone to speak with each other, you know, and maybe to find common ground, how we can join forces.
Yeah. And so what I'd recommend is that we'll take the time to summarize everything on the mirror boards into the report and make some recommendations. And then I think we need to find some way to share that with the community for input. Maybe it's another mirror board with the report in it. And then in the meantime, if there are suggestions about how to build that community, we're certainly open to that.
Yeah, certainly we are very much open to suggestions on how we can effectively build the community. Maybe you have specific ideas how we can do it. And of course, we would be happy, you know, to see any active people actually, you know, proposing things for us to do, making recommendations to us. I will just ask maybe for one last time, if there are any comments maybe to any part of the workshop or anything else. And if there is nothing, we will close this workshop for today.
Yes, I just want to thank everybody for the contribution so far. But like someone said, and like you said, there's need for us to just open up the community for related agency. They're already doing similar things. You get it, Synergy, Inputs, United Nations, the ICG, International Committee of GNSS that's working on compatibility and operability of PNT system for lunar PNT. That also brings up a lot of database. So very important to cooperate with UN and UN related bodies, including time frame, reference frames body, you have the IAG, FIG, IGS, lots of body. That's just my contribution for now. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for this comment. Anyone else? I suppose if there is silence, it means that we need to close the workshop. And as it was already said, we will take time to analyze everything. There will be a recording. So we will make sure that you get these materials. And we would also, as Tim mentioned, we would love to get your suggestions on how to build an international community for interoperability. Thank you so much for participating in this workshop, for taking the time to be with us today, for contributing to the mirror boards, for expressing your opinions. Thank you so much to GEGSLA, Logic, and LSIC for being the partners of this event, for the suggestions, tips, and coordination. Very much grateful for our expert panel speakers, for being there with us, for sharing their views and contributing to this discussion on interoperability. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for people who help us to manage this workshop, specifically Glavki. I don't know if she's still there, but thank you so much to her. And I want also to say thank you to Tim and Marshall for trusting me, for being on board with the idea of conducting a workshop on interoperability. Thank you so much, everyone. And let's keep in touch and build this community together. I will stop the recording.